Shalom. Today we're going to be talking about God's head count. This Torah portion that we are reading this week is focused on the book of Numbers, chapters 1 to 4, verse 20. I call this Torah's portion God's head count because if you take a moment and simply glance at the portion, it's all about names. This head count is important because God understood that his people would greatly benefit from making sure that things were recorded precisely the way that it needed to be. As a matter of fact, the entire Tanakh, especially the Torah, is completely themed this way. You see every measurement completely precise. It has to be done thoroughly and perfectly. Everything in the Torah is extremely specific in regards to the law and the territories of the promised land, the names of the tribes and the people, and so on. Everyone had an inheritance, and everyone had a function in the land, which included those who were separated for the work of the Lord, the Levites. God, in his divine foreknowledge, understood that the people of Israel were going to engage in many military conflicts, especially when they entered the Promised Land. There were many enemies and many giants, which meant they needed to have a large army. Many troops needed to be recruited for this endeavor. They were going to encounter many different challenges in their history and in their conquest for the land of Canaan, which is now the land of Israel, and they needed to have a military force. This was the beginning of God developing something extraordinary. There was much work to do, and there was little time to do it. Every moment counts. Every minute is precious, and at any second they could have been attacked by an enemy. They needed to be ready for battle, and it had to be done now. By the way, it was no small army. God was preparing Israel to become a world superpower of its day, but there needed to be a head count so that future generations could know and be reminded of how God built an entire nation. And yes, that entire nation began with one man called Abraham. Of course, a king needs to have a head count of those who will tend to his personal quarters. God made sure that Moses and Aaron selected the men of ages 30 to 50 who could work at the tent of meeting. They had to make sure that everyone involving the necessary duties of the tent were flowing well, because there would be much movement taking place, with all the offerings being made to God. There needed to be a lot of people involved. All hands on deck. However, there was a reminder that only Aaron and his sons were allowed to go into the holy place and instruct what everyone was to do. The Kohathites were not to go in themselves to look at the holy things, or they would die. Everyone had a job to do and needed to stay in their lane. The same way that there was a head count by God back then, there is a head count today. But it is a different type of head count. This head count is the head count of salvation. There needs to be a head count making sure that everyone who is meant to be saved is saved, and not one can be missing from the flock. It is of the utmost importance that we have all hands on deck for the mission that Jesus gave us. There are so many people who are in need to be recruited into the kingdom of God. And there are many territories that need to be divided on the earth because there is still land to be conquered for the Lord. There is going to come a time where the entire world, the entire earth, will be under God's dominion. But until then, we are still in an international conquest. Therefore, God sends us as His priests and laborers to go bring the people in so this head count can happen. And here is the thing that I want everyone to remember more than anything in the day and age that we're living in. That is, the head count is almost over, and there is still so much work to do.